James, my father, was a railroad conductor. Claire, my mother, worked as a secretary. Caleb, my brother, was already their prized possession. The news that my mom was pregnant with me came to her when he was 5 years old. I was already making my way inside of her when she found out about it. They claimed they had one child enough and didn't want any more. We should get rid of it, I overheard Mom saying to Dad one night. She was telling him the story for the 100th time when I was around 6 years old. However, those awful physicians warned me that it could be harmful to my health. This was our only option. I was that sickly child who battled every illness imaginable, the common cold, the flu, ear infections, and more. Mother lost her job due to the amount of time she had to take off to care for me at home. She was fired, and I still recall that day. A disdainful expression crossed her face when she returned home and spoke to me, saying, "Well, Amber, I hope you're happy now." My grandmother, who was my father's mother, was the one bright point during those early years. A warm gust of Grandma's soup and kisses would blow into our house like a breeze, even though Mom would hardly touch me while I was sick. As she would embrace me, she would say, "Come here, my sweet girl." From her perch in the doorway, Mom would observe and scowl. No matter what she has, Dad would tell her. My grandma would merely chuckle. As she kissed my forehead, she would add, "Love is the best medicine." We couldn't have survived those years without her financial assistance, which she also provided. My mother made sure I was aware of this by constantly harping on the financial strain I was putting on the family. Healthy, athletic, and beloved by our parents, Caleb exemplified all that I lacked. I stayed in bed or went to the doctor all day while he went out and won medals playing soccer, which made our parents proud. While I, unseen by them, shuffled food around my plate, they beamingly asked him about his day, his friends, and his dreams. My health suddenly improved around the time I became 8 years old, as if by magic. It seemed like my body had finally made up its mind to help. There will be an end to the never-ending cycle of illness, absenteeism, and doctor appointments. My mom was able to return to work, but her career was never the same. I was told by my mom, finally, when I survived the first month without being sick, "Maybe now we can have some normalcy around here." The meaning of normalcy, however, turned out to be different from what I had anticipated. It just meant that I was in good enough health to be the shadowy secondary child in our family image behind my brother, the shining star. Despite Dad's struggles, Grandma never stopped being there for us, providing for our every need. When Mother established college savings accounts for Caleb and me, it was the clearest sign of her love for us. "Education is the key to everything in life," Grandma would always say when we visited her on the weekends. The way she spoke of our future together would light up her eyes. With good education, you can achieve anything you dream of. My parents wanted me to spend time with Grandma so they could spend alone with Caleb, not because they wanted me to have a bond with her. I even started keeping my toothbrush and pajamas at her place because it got so normal. Grandma would explain, "Your parents are taking Caleb to his soccer tournament this weekend," while attempting to hide her unhappiness in her voice. "We'll have a girls' weekend, just you and me." On a specific Saturday, I was over at her place, watching television. Because Caleb's basketball game went into overtime, my mom called to let me know that they would be late bringing me up. They won, Grandma declared as she hung up the phone. "Your brother scored the winning points." I mumbled something about how lovely that was since I was sick of hearing about Caleb's accomplishments. "What would you like to do, sweetheart?" Sitting next to me, Grandma inquired. "You never talk about your interests." At that point, I confessed to her that I had been pleading with my parents to allow me enroll in ice skating lessons. My mind kept returning to the mall's ice rink and the sensation of skating gracefully on its mirror-like surface. My explanation was that they couldn't afford it, as I picked at a loose thread on my sleeve. A mother had told me that. but they just paid for Caleb's new soccer gear and basketball shoes last week. I mustered up the nerve to inquire about voice lessons a few days later. My vocal teacher told me I belonged in the school chorus. Mom added, "Honey, we spend all our extra money on your brother's activities," without taking her eyes off her phone. In athletics, he is demonstrating great potential. He has to have his future invested in. But Grandma set up education funds for both of us. I countered, "Couldn't we use some of that?" When Dad entered, he spoke with a stern tone. "Amber, you will use that money for college. These events are necessary for Caleb's college applications. Are you aware of that?" I was perplexed. I watched on the sidelines and unable to grasp why Caleb was allowed to participate in every sport he desired, whether it was soccer, basketball, swimming, or track. I never understood why they showed up to any of his games without ever inquiring about my preferences. I never got why he was their firstborn, and I was just another name in the shuffle. From elementary school until middle school, the trend persisted. Caleb always ended up winning whenever we had to choose between his plans and mine. At Grandma's place, I would do my homework alone as they sat in the bleachers, cheering for him and sharing their proud parent moments on social media. Their joy knew no bounds when Caleb received acceptance to the priciest university in the neighboring state. Cost was completely irrelevant. They claimed they'd make it work. The future of their son was at stake, after all. Mama gushed, "We're so blessed to have such a brilliant boy," at his farewell celebration. "He's going to do amazing things." As I stood in the corner, clutching an unappealing plate of cake, I beheld their adoration for him. Mom snapped pictures for Facebook as Caleb and his dad were smiling broadly, with Dad's arm around Caleb's shoulders. Weekend visits followed. It was routine for them to load up and travel 6 hours to see him every other weekend. I would spend my weekends at Grandma's house, glued to my phone, observing their exciting social media posts because I was never invited. Photograph after photograph and video after video. Caleb, his parents, and Dad out and about in the city, enjoying meals and football games. As a trio, they appeared content and whole. Weekend with our pride and joy, and the subtitles were the worst part. Best son ever. Making memories with the light of our lives. Family time with our only hope for the future. After what felt like an eternity, I finally snapped. I approached them as they were preparing for another weekend excursion to visit Caleb. "Why do you pretend I don't exist?" I inquired, my voice quivering. "You leave me out of your posts and you never include me in your adventures. You feel as though I'm not needed here." From her suitcase, Mom hardly raised her eyes. "There you go again, always complaining. It's not that I'm unhappy. All I'm doing is—" "You should be thankful you're even here," she interrupted me, her voice acerbic. "Or did you forget I wanted to have an abortion?" I felt a slap from the words. While Mom uttered some terribly hurtful words to their daughter, Dad remained there, fiddling with his phone as if nothing had happened. At that moment, everything fell into place. I had spent the last several years seeking a more profound justification for their treatment of me. Perhaps they were worried about their finances. Perhaps having 2 children was too much for them. Perhaps they were unsure of how to equally love each child. But no, there was an easier way to put it. It was simple. They disliked me. I was unwanted by them. That was never the case, and it never will be. I was the kid they had no choice but to have, the one who shattered their idyllic 3-generation family. What a blunder they were stuck with. I felt a part of me crumble as I stood in our living room and watched them get ready for another weekend with their only child, or so they thought. Contrary to my expectations, the agony wasn't as severe. Rather, it felt as if a chain were to shatter, releasing me from the overwhelming desire to win their affection. Like all of Caleb's other milestones, his 20th birthday was a huge deal. Not only did his parents drive all the way to his college town, but they also made arrangements for him to bring his closest high school pals with him. A whole restaurant was reserved for their enormous surprise celebration. "That weekend, you'll be spending time at Grandma's," Mom told me without even feigning curiosity. "We'll be too busy with the party arrangements." The entire event was streamed live on Instagram, so I was able to see it all. While Caleb entered the restaurant, his college friends cheered, and Dad gave an emotional statement about how proud he was of his only kid every day. Mom was busy with her customary social media coverage, making sure to catch every moment. This time, though, when I sat on Grandma's couch and watched it all on my phone, something seemed different. I no longer felt the recognizable pain in my chest. "Would you like me to turn it off?" Upon seeing that I was gazing at the water, Grandma inquired. "No," I responded, taking everyone by surprise. "I'm actually okay." I was too. Over time, the agony of being overlooked had transformed into a state of contentment. Grandma was still in my life, and she taught me the meaning of love. She might have shown her concern for me without posting on social media. Well, she accomplished it all by herself. 2 years down the road, when I was 17 years old, Caleb announced his marriage engagement after graduating from college. His fiancée, Patricia, was 35 years old, had been through a divorce, and was a mother of 2. On top of that, she was loaded. Can you believe our luck? The night Caleb invited Patricia around for supper, Mom let out a squeal. "Our son has found such a wonderful, established woman." At our dining table, Patricia sat aglow in jewels and luxury clothing as her 2 children played on pricey iPads. Caleb gave her the same expression he would give a lucky winner, which is exactly how our parents saw it. Dad proudly announced, "We're going to throw you the most amazing wedding," as he began searching for potential locations on his phone. Nothing but the best for our boy and his new family. The designs became increasingly grandiose as time went on. All the trimmings, first-rate location, delectable food, a live band, ice sculptures, and more. The expenses continued to rise. After listening to them talk about hiring a celebrity chef for the wedding one night, I mustered up the courage to raise the question that had been bothering me all along. "Where are you getting all this money from?" During supper, I inquired. "This must cost a fortune." I couldn't quite decipher the glance that Mom and Dad exchanged. "That's not your problem, Amber," Mom replied in a condescending manner, as if removing an annoyance from the air. "Leaving a positive impression on Patricia is paramount. We need this wedding to be picture perfect." Once again, the familiar sensation of being an outsider in my own family washed over me as I glanced down at my plate. This time, though, there was an additional factor, a persistent sensation that they had something to hide. All of a sudden, Mom phoned me while her voice was shaking to inform me that Dad had been in a train accident. I was in the midst of studying for my exams at the time. My heart sank. No matter what happened, he was always my dad. Upon my arrival, the hospital corridors were strangely silent. Easily, I located Dad's bedroom. Hovering over at his bedside, Mom was already there. With a face that was bruised but not badly hurt, Dad was awake and propped up against some white cushions. His thumb drew restlessly across the screen of his phone, and his gaze remained riveted on it. "Hi, Dad," I whispered. Upwards, he scarcely looked. He asked Mom, "Has Caleb called?" regardless of my presence. "Not yet, my darling," Mom said. "I'm sure he will soon." Felt like an outsider standing there, clumsily observing the situation. In our shared quiet, the cardiac monitor's constant beep broke the silence. Mom finally looked at me as she twisted her face in concern, but it wasn't about Dad's health. I'd find out later that it was about something else entirely. "Your father erred," she stated firmly. "He disregarded certain workplace safety procedures. The business will neither compensate him or cover his medical bills." Still fixated on his phone, Dad squirmed uneasily in bed. "We have to find a way to pay for his treatment," Mom said. "A lot of money." I said, "What about my education fund?" without giving it much thought. "You mean the one Grandma set up? That could be useful." "Yes, that's just okay with me. College takes a back seat to Dad's health." At the very least, I was hoping for some expression of appreciation for my offer. I felt my skin crawl as Mom let out a sour, harsh laugh. "Oh, Amber," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with scorn. "The funds have been spent. For Caleb's wedding, we utilized it. Impressing Patricia's family was crucial." Like a punch in the stomach, the words landed on me. I remained motionless, attempting to make sense of the sounds around me. They paid for Caleb's wedding out of my education money. And now, Mom proclaimed, "You need to get employment following graduation. Borrow money. Please chip in so that your dad can get the care he needs." I glanced up at my parents, the ones who were meant to love and protect me, while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Finally, that cold, clinical hospital room, with the airborne disinfectant and disappointment lingering around me, I grasped the depth of their treachery. "How could you spend my education money?" Despite being in a medical facility, I raised my voice and demanded, "You didn't get to spend that. My grandma donated it to you so that I might use it in the future." The expression of disdain on Mom's face hardened into one I'd seen countless times before. On this occasion, though, I refused to back down. "You have no right to demand answers from us," she yelled. "Not a single one. The fact that you are alive and able to inquire is a blessing. Also, did you forget that I wanted to have an abortion?" Poisonous words lingered in the atmosphere. This was the first time I'd ever heard them utilize the fact that I was on the verge of having an abortion as an argument against me. At this point, they had passed an immutable boundary. Hurriedly, I dashed past the nurse's station, along the immaculate hallways, out the automated doors, and into the parking lot. I could hardly take my phone out of my pocket since my hands were trembling so terribly. I called Grandma's number despite my tears. "My darling," her soothing voice echoed over the speaker, "where are you?" A cascade of events unfolded, including the accident, Dad's treatment, the theft of my education fund, and Mom's harsh comments. My voice was quivering as I spoke, but Grandma listened intently. There was a brief pause after I finished before she responded, and her voice was as determined as anything I had ever heard before. A firm "pack your things" was her command. "Every single one. Right now, you're going to move in with me." I deeply regret not intervening sooner. In a state of disbelief, I drove home, retrieved my suitcases, and began tossing in all of my belongings, including clothing, books, and the few priceless keepsakes I had accumulated during the years. The sound of the front door slamming interrupted my process of clearing out my dresser. "What do you think you're doing?" A sharp whisper from Mom sliced through the air. My packing continued unabated. "I'm departing. I have decided to move in with my grandma." Her words pierced through me as she put herself in my path, emphasizing that this was not the case. "At the hospital, your dad needs someone to watch after him. It's time for you to take charge and contribute. I'm sick of hearing about this." I let out a laugh that astonished even me, a hollow, bitter sound. "What am I to do? Caleb is your beloved son. Why isn't he pitching in to help? Where is your ideal son at this moment?" Mom's expression softened, and I noticed a new emotion, fear, in her eyes for the very first time. As she collapsed onto my bed, she said, "Caleb, he can't help right now. Patricia is in a bad place. She doesn't support him monetarily. Instead, she treats him like a trophy spouse and flaunts him at social events." She took a cautious breath in. "Right now, she's threatening to kick him out. He has nowhere else to turn. Until he secures employment, he must return to his hometown." A job, I felt compelled to sneer. Caleb has never labored in his entire life. Tell me how much time you anticipate it will take. According to Mom, that's why we need you, she continued with that deceptive tone that I was familiar with. Right now, your dad requires medical attention. For Caleb to secure employment, we must wait. Help us out, please. I finally secured my suitcase's zipper. Oh no, that's it. Your actions have resulted in the theft of my education finance. Throughout my life, you have treated me with complete disregard. I will not resort to taking out loans in order to rectify your errors. I refuse to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of my absent father. That's it. Amber, you can't just watch me. Grabbing my bags, I made my way past her motionless figure and made my way to the door. Just before crossing the threshold, I took a final U-turn. Inquire about assistance from your soul child. I have faith that he will find a solution. My mind raced as we drove to Grandma's place, yet I felt lighter and lighter with every mile. My emotions had turned to ones of relief by the time I arrived into her driveway. My mom made my leaving into a viral sensation in the span of 3 days. For some reason, the very Facebook account that had previously pretended I didn't exist started raving about me nonstop. Deeply sad, she started her initial post. Just when we needed her most, our youngest daughter left us high and dry. She will not even assist her own parents as my spouse lies in a hospital bed. Rather, she has escaped and is now staying with her grandma. Why did we bring up a child that is so self-centered? Almost immediately, comments started pouring in. Friends and distant relatives who had only ever seen our family's staged photos were quick to judge me. However, more perspectives emerged from those who had witnessed the reality throughout time. Are you going to tell everyone how you ignored her for years, or should I? Said my cousin Emma. To which my aunt Rachel said, It's funny that you didn't bring up Amber in your posts until you had a need for her services. Next, my aunt Lisa's message arrived, a family law attorney and Mom's sister. Her opinions were more weighty. What about Claire? You are disregarding my private messages, so I must issue a public warning. Publicly slandering your daughter, who is still a child, is what you're doing. Even though Amber is 17 years old, you are legally obligated to ensure her safety and well-being. Child Protective Services may investigate her possible forced departure from the household and your subsequent social media campaign targeting her. Is it your desire? For I promise they will uncover much more than these Facebook posts if they look into it. After that, Mom removed her initial post, but she still hadn't finished. Without knocking, she stumped over to Grandma's house the following morning. Mother, she said to Grandma, drawing my attention away from me, you must speak sense to Amber. This small uprising has continued for far too long. Deliberately and slowly, Grandma placed her coffee cup down. Never before had I seen her so serious. Rebellion? She whispered softly. Is that what you call it when a child finally stands up to years of mistreatment? Mistreatment. Mother frowned. We gave her everything. Everything. An uptick in Grandma's voice was audible. You trusted Caleb with everything. Your wedding was a waste of Amber's education fund, which I had set away for her future, and all it accomplished was to make him seem good to the woman who is now threatening to kick him out. We needed. Gran interrupted her, saying, You needed to think about both your children's futures. On the contrary, you spent money like there was no stopping you. I mean, isn't tomorrow already here? No way will I be the one to foot the bill for James's medical care. Even though Mom was upset, her tears weren't of shame, they were of anger. Her deception had backfired, and she was so frustrated that she cried. Grandma snatched my hand as the door banged shut behind her. The cost of my dad's medical care was so high that my parents had no choice but to sell our family home less than a month after I left. They downsized to a 2-bedroom apartment in an unsavory neighborhood. Afterwards, Caleb appeared at their front door. His spoiled brat ways had finally gotten to Patricia. She had evicted him from the house, leaving him with nothing save his beautiful wedding watch and his fancy clothing. He was anticipating the same imperial treatment he had always gotten when he arrived at our parents' new residence. They made an initial effort to keep the pretense going. According to rumors circulating inside the family, Mom remained preparing his favorite dishes even after he left, while Dad was coming up with reasons why Caleb couldn't get a job immediately. However, even the most vehement denials are eventually overcome by fact. Did you hear? I was having breakfast with my grandma when she told me, "Caleb needs to find work. Your mom has finally informed him." Being unprepared for the real world, he claimed, meant they owed him a luxurious life. It was the cause of their enormous quarrel. At the same time I was constructing my own life, my parents didn't realize that I had decent grades when I graduated from high school. With Grandma's aid, I enrolled in the accounting program at the community college in my area. It wasn't the elite college I had hoped for, but it would provide me with the groundwork for a secure professional future. An internship at a downtown accounting firm was even within my reach. The experience was priceless, but the remuneration was meager. Mrs. Chen, my supervisor, praised my meticulousness, something my parents had always criticized as being too perfectionist. Unexpectedly, staying with Grandma was a restorative experience. We got into a good habit of having breakfast together before I left for school or work, and we would have dinner together afterward, during which we would catch up on each other's days. She took the time to hear me out, inquired about my life, and praised even the smallest of my accomplishments. The day finally arrived when she requested that I go to her lawyer's office with her. She casually mentioned that she needed to update some documents. Sitting in the plush office, I restrained my fidgeting as her attorney, Mr. Peterson, produced a document. "Grandma, I am revising my will," she declared. "I want to make sure everything's properly arranged." Listening to Mr. Peterson read, my heart froze. The home, her funds, and even her prized collection of antique jewelry were all bequeathed to me by my grandma. Everything. "Are you sure?" On our way out of the office, I mumbled something. "What about Dad and Caleb?" As she held my hand, Grandma embraced me. "The amount of money your brother and father have taken from you is fair. They can't take anything else from me. Right now, I'm safeguarding your future." I fought back tears as I embraced her tightly. I vowed not to tell them. "Good," she said with a smile. "Let them figure out their own futures for once." I reflected on how much my life had changed that night as I lay in bed in the room that had become mine, not simply a space I occupied in someone else's house, but truly my own. Caleb, my parents, and I were all living in a cramped apartment when we had an argument over money and who was to blame. Mom no longer used any social media at all. Dad had returned to work, but he had been demoted to a desk job. What about me? I was flourishing. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely desired. I also had a loving grandmother and a future that I was creating for myself. In some cases, the family into which you are born may not be the one you are destined to remain. Taking a break and starting over can be the best course of action sometimes.